This is pretty cool. I'm seeing places on the backside of the wheel where the original color is showing through. You can see that it was oversprayed at one point, but I think this is the original Harvard red that the Jeep would have been shipped with. So that means I can spray some swatches, hold it up against here, and see if I've got a good match for that. Well, I'm messing around with the first of the wheels, got this one all cleaned up, and I painted it with two different colors. You might not be able to see that on the camera, but on the right, I've got this Rust-Oleum Regal red. It's from their professional line. And then on the left side, I've got a Ace branded International Harvester red. So they're going to be similar paint, similar durability, just a matter of color. I would say the Regal red has a little bit more almost plum color, and the International Harvester red has a little bit more kind of like a candy apple, venturing towards orange. I think that the Regal red is probably closer, true to color. The original color was called Harvard red, and people say that Regal red is the closest approximation, and I think it looks the best too. Well, for a quick rattle can, I think that Regal red looks pretty good. All right, well that was fun, but it was really just about figuring out which color I was going to use, and I cheated by picking out one of the nicest wheels of the bunch, one that just needed Scotch-Brite before I could shoot it, and then I got to skip to the fun part at the end, peeling off the masking tape. But now I've got to face reality because there's 4 more wheels that need painting, some have some damage, and all need a lot more preparation, so here we go. That's the best part. All right, let's do some basic wheel repair. You can see there's definitely an impact here. And this is all bent up. Now, there are tools that tire shops have. I used to work in one. It's basically just a big wrench that grabs this lip, helps you bend it over. But I think a big crescent wrench will do the same thing, but that means I'm gonna have to break that bead loose. Shouldn't be too much problem. So let's pull out the valve stem, break this bead, see what I can do with just a regular old crescent wrench. Well, even with the valve stem removed, this tire is much stiffer than I expected. I guess that's what you get from these old school traction style tires. Anyways, I'm 200 pounds, I was bouncing up and down, and this bead would not slide off. So I'm using this press to do the job instead. I don't love using presses, but in this case, I think it's gonna work. Ooh, it's getting a little pointy at the edge. I might rearrange the steel that I've got in place, but you can at least see the idea here. It is pulling that bead away from the wheel. It's stuck basically on this surface in here. That's where it needs to slide. I found a different plate to use so that I can put more pressure on the tire before the corners of the plate hit the sidewalls, but even with all this pressure on there, you can see where the bead still wants to stick to the inside of that rim. So it's taking a lot of pressure, but with this style plate, I think that I can get a crowbar in there and help it along. So we'll try that next. Time to do some sketchy stuff. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Let's see if we get this in there. Help it out just a little bit. Not the right tools for the job, but I will get it eventually. Well, it ain't pretty, but I just kept on driving the cylinder down, and now that bead, you can see, is kind of flipped backwards, but there is almost an inch of the bead surface on the wheel. It's exposed, so when I release it, I should still have some space in there. I had to use a little lube too, that helped. Well, even though I wasn't able to break that bead free, it may not matter because I'm able to get this big crescent wrench onto the edge of the rim, and it looks ugly, but it is effective at bending that lip back. If I just kind of get it on just the right spot, slide it down as much as I can, tighten it up as much as I can, those jaws are strong enough. Just kind of wiggle that lip into place. You can see it's already getting pretty round, so I'm just going to keep on tweaking with it. It's not an F1 wheel, but I would like it to look nice. Let's get it tight on there, give it a wiggle, and bend it back. Not bad. Hey, that's kind of round. So I'm sure this is completely unnecessary, but the shop I'm working at does have one of these tire fill cages, and for big trucks, they're absolutely essential. For little tiny 80-year-old Jeeps, I don't know, maybe they're still a good idea. Anyways, I'm gonna fill up in here just for a little bit of added safety on these unknown old wheels and tires. I'm basically overfilling these wheels higher pressure than I normally would, so I can seat that bead really, really well before I go on to blasting. That ought to do it. This one's got a bit of an oddball valve stem, you can see it has this extra part that sticks out on the end with that spring on it, but the upper part of it should be the same as any valve stem. Basically, there's a seat right there. You can see a little rubber black band there. That's actually what seats up against the body of the valve stem, and that's your air seal. So I went ahead and just sprayed it with a little bit of soap, and so I'll stick it back in. If it doesn't work, I've got a brand new one, but it's the conventional type. Yep, leak is fixed by a new valve stem. I think it's just a problem with the little black O-ring on the seat of this old one. So never a bad idea just to put in a new valve stem. Now I'll do the same for the spare. This tire is old. I'm guessing that's a date, May 1966. It clearly says military, and it's made by Firestone. Not sure much else about it, but it's cool. It looks neat. It's definitely the original style. Just don't know if I would drive on it. Anyway, we'll put some air in it and see how it holds up. Wow, this 60-year-old nylon tire still holding some air. That's great. With the tires inflated, I headed back over to the pressure washing basin so I could do some more wet blasting. And this is the same process that I used successfully to strip down the frame and the suspension prior to painting. If you're interested in learning more, go ahead and see my part 3 video where I go into lots of details about how the process works and how I made it work for me. But it does strip down the paint and the rust really nicely. It uses an abrasive shot down a water stream using an adapter on a pressure washer, and that keeps the abrasive out of the air and out of my lungs. And as you can see, I can control it really easily and strip these wheels down to prepare them for paint. I actually did remove all the rust except for just a little bit that I cleared up with some phosphoric acid, giving me a nice clean substrate to paint on. I also used some Zep industrial cleaner to remove any traces of grease. And between the acid, the grease remover, and the wet blasting, this metal is as clean as it's been since the 40s. Well, they're done. I've got 4 nice, clean, almost ready to paint wheels. The one that maybe I had the hardest time with was this spare. I don't know what kind of 1940s primer and paint it's got on it, but this stuff is super tough. It survived the abrasive blast and the steam cleaning, and the steam cleaning itself did quite a job on these wheels. So anyways, they're clean. I'm gonna do an acid wash to clean off that surface rust, more importantly etch the steel, just like I did on the frame. But they'll be totally clean and ready to paint in no time. Me on the other hand, I'm filthy, I'm wet. It was fun, wouldn't recommend it every day. Well, with the wheels all clean and stripped, I turned my attention to masking off the tires, which I had opted to keep mounted on the wheels for this project. And I've tried all different methods, and I wanted to see if I could try a new one that might work a little bit better. It was inspired by something I had seen online. Now, there's lots of tricks you'll see, everything from just basic masking tape to the playing card trick. This one used a big heavy-duty garbage bag, and basically what you do is you bunch it up and you figure out the distance from the wheel rim to the center of the wheel. You kind of grab that much of the bunched up plastic, chop it off, and then when you spread the bag back out, you end up with a hole cut in the center, and not only one hole, you actually have 2 holes for both sides of the bag. Then you put the wheel into the bag and you've got openings that somewhat approximate the size of the tire or the wheel. At this point, you just need to use masking tape to attach that bag to the wheel rim. And where I've always gone wrong in the past is trying to curve masking tape around the wheel rim, and it just doesn't want to. I mean, even if you get thin masking tape, it just doesn't want to turn very well. Even though there is a perfect slot for it to sit down into, it'll want to bunch up and wrinkle. So in this case, I adopted a different approach, which was to just try to get the masking tape to go from the plastic over the remainder of the tire and onto the top surface of the rim, but not precisely. In other words, just get the tape into the right area, but leave it kind of up on the surface. The key was coming back around, leaning on the tire to push its sort of bead down, creating a bigger gap around the wheel, and then using a screwdriver or another tool to actually tuck that masking tape down. So you don't have to have the masking tape precisely fitted, because what you're doing is pushing the tire down and then stuffing the masking tape, even if it's ill-fitting, into the space between the tire and the rim. So once you've got the masking tape tucked into the tire/rim on both sides, then you just wrap up the excess bag and wrap tape around the perimeter of the tire, and you've got this nice neat package that you can actually move around and spray as much as you want on both sides without having to worry about getting any paint onto the tire. After that, it's just regular spray paint like everyone's done lots of times, but there are a few tips that I'll share that make it go a little more smoothly. First off, I'm wiping down the wheels with mineral spirits to remove any oils or dust that may have accumulated before applying my first very light coat of primer. I then come back and apply a second very wet, heavy coat, and that's the one that's allowed to flow out and self-level and give a really nice surface finish for subsequent coats. And by doing 3 wheels at once, it makes it really easy to time those individual coats, give lots of time in between them for the paint to dry sufficiently. But overall, I am racing against the clock. I want to get all layers applied within 1 hour, and that's based on the instructions on the back of these cans. They want you to apply a top coat directly to the primer before it dries. All coats finished within 1 hour, or else you need to wait 48 hours for all layers to dry. Then you have to scuff up the existing paint, and you can paint on top, but you get a more mechanical bond rather than a chemical bond. So I'm trying to get everything on within 1 hour so that it's all effectively one continuous layer of paint, chemically bonded and drying together. Another thing that I do as far as technique, I throw out my normal technique of consecutive layers left to right. Instead, I just lock my hand in relative to a particular point on the wheel and act like I'm some sort of rotary paint robot. I literally just walk circles around the wheels, holding my hand at a particular angle, and that lets me see when I've gone all the way around on a particular face of the wheel. I can change the angle of my hand just a little bit to hit a new area of the wheel, continue walking in circles. I know it looks funny on video, but it's actually very effective on round objects like these wheels. Lastly, I do preheat my paint cans. I put them in an oven at least usually an hour before I'm ready to shoot. I set it to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, so nothing crazy, basically like a hot desert day, but that heat does let the paint aerosolize more easily into smaller droplets. When those small warm droplets hit the surface, they integrate into existing paint layers nicely, they flow out easily, they self-level, and they give you that shiny sort of mirror finish that you're looking for on something like a wheel.
All right, I think the painting is done for today. I've got 5 wheels, 4 of them are drying. This was the first one that I painted. I painted it separately because I did all the stripping manually with sandpaper and Scotch-Brite. That's what led me to go to the wet blasting on these other 3 out of 4 and putting this there. I realized I didn't really explain the overall plan here. The strategy was basically get them painted, make them presentable. This may not be the final coating on these wheels, however. There is a couple different questions around, well, do we want to take the tires off and put new tires on? If that's the case, then we'll paint the entire wheel, including the inside of it. Right now, these tires are okay. They're actually tubed. So the tires have a little bit of cracking on the surface, but it doesn't matter in this situation. They're sound, they're only about 10 years old, and they've got tubes inside, so they hold air. That's kind of the important thing. It's going to be off the highway most of the time anyways. So maybe they'll get new tires, at which point paint the entire wheels. The other thing is the color. This is the closest approximation I could find so far for the original color, which would have been Harvard Red. This is actually called Regal Red. It's available from a couple different brands, and it seems to be a pretty good match, and I like how it looks. So the color is a bit of an experiment. The overriding thing, though, is looking for just progress and getting this thing on the road, not perfection. And the owner's priority is getting it on the road, getting it workable, finished enough to operate it, enjoy it, versus trying to get it to be perfect. We're not trying to do a museum restoration here or even anything close to it. So this may be just temporary, but it may be permanent too. I took it as a learning experience, and I think it actually came out pretty well. And here's what the cans look like. It's just Rust-Oleum, high performance enamel in their professional line. What that means basically is high solids versus the solvent that's inside. So this is going to be what you find on industrial equipment, farm equipment, tractors, just stuff that sits outside and needs high durability. Doesn't necessarily need the automotive type of shine, but you need hard wearing, abrasion resistant, UV resistant, and durability over time. So this should work pretty well. Of course, they are rattle cans. Rattle cans get, I think, a bad reputation because, in my opinion, it's because they take so long to dry. I think that rattle cans, especially if you get the kind of high solids versions, can work really well. They just take way longer to cure than you're expecting. It's not like an epoxy or something like that where it's rock hard the next day. So I'm going to put these away and make sure that they don't get touched for weeks, definitely at least a week, maybe 2-3 weeks. In this situation, it totally matched the needs though. Again, maybe we're gonna paint the rest of the wheels, maybe we'll change colors, maybe we'll decide actually to powder coat the whole thing. Those are things that can be done after the restoration of the Willys is complete though. The wheels are the easiest thing to take off later on, do something else with them. It's not like, I don't know, painting a transmission or something that like it has to be done and whatever you decide, it's gonna be done today where everything goes around it. The wheels can come off at any time and we can change the coating then. So this definitely matches the needs from the owner. It's going to be functional and good looking in the meantime, and change it later. And like I said before, getting the project back on its wheels, high priority. Finding the perfect coating that this thing can live with forever, long-term priority. Figure that out later. So I'm going to take these and put them in someplace safe where they can dry a good long time. Then I want to get them back onto the axles, make that Willys mobile again.
Well, thanks for following along on this project, and in the future I'll definitely try to improve that audio. You know, there's so many different ways to paint wheels. I went looking around for all different kinds of ideas, and I tried to combine some things that I learned along with the tried and true methods that I've used for years. Hopefully you found this informative, but there's always more to learn, so if you've got suggestions or questions or ideas, go ahead and throw them below in the comments. I always appreciate reading those. Hit the like button if you did find this interesting or even at least entertaining, and until the next one, thanks a lot for watching.